says in Deuteronomy 34 verse 1, and Moses went up from the plains of Moab unto the mountains of Nebo to the top of Pisgah, that is over against Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead unto Dan, and all Naphtali and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah unto the utmost sea, and the mouth and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees unto Zoar. And the Lord said unto him, this is the land which I swore unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it unto thy seed. I have caused thee to see it with thine own eyes, but thou shalt not go over the river. Finally they reached the land. What a trip. We're basically just looking at the geography first. So the boundaries of Canaan extends from the river of Egypt, which is right at the bottom, or also bottom end will be called the Negev, which is the very dry region, to the foothills of Mount Hermon, which is right on top, close to Dan. You'll always hear them say from Dan to Beersheba in some texts. That would be the extent from the north to the south. Mount Hermon is on the north, and to your west you have the Mediterranean Sea, and to the east you have the Jordan River. Now Canaan was this is a very small country, 305 to 320 kilometers long and 120 kilometers wide. It's a very small strip of land. At the time of Solomon, the kingdom was extended and stretched from Dan to Ezion Gibeah, 480 kilometers. So besides the 320, he stretches it another 160 on the Gulf of Aqaba, where he maintained a merchant fleet. Now the life of the Hebrew nation took place in an area only 144 kilometers north and south, and 120 kilometers east and west. And this, you'll find that they mainly almost in the center, more in the hilly country than any of the other parts, which is strange, but the hilly country was the fertile part. Because where they concentrated themselves, you mostly found ravines and valleys and so forth. And so there was low-lying areas and high hill country. So and rivers running through these particular areas. And then there was 3 valleys coming from the west of the Mediterranean Sea, also with 3 rivers, also feeding water into the land. So there's into the middle or central part, that is where they congregated. Central and mostly to the north, congregated as a nation. They didn't even congregate on the coastal plains, for that matter. There were a few small kingdoms bordering Canaan. In the north you had Syria, which included Tyre and Sidon, cities in Lebanon and anti-Lebanon mountains. In the east you had the Arabian steppe, or the Ammonites and the Moabites, which was on the opposite side of Jordan. Southeast you had Edom, and later the Nabateans. And in the south you had Sinai. Now, like I said to you, the narrow west coastal plain along Mediterranean, that is where your Philistines mostly gathered, all along the strip, Gaza, Joppa, Echo, those areas. But that's because they were seafarers. And it seemed to me, if we go further in the history, we'll notice later that they must have come from a similar type of terrain or area for them to settle in so quickly, actually. And not to find it too difficult to settle in that type of area. Because basically, along that strip, you have also these high hills and then these steep edges towards the sea. So it's very difficult to have ports along that way. Yet they chose to live there, because you were dependent on the sea. So if they chose to live there, it means they must have been dependent on the sea previously. That's why they probably settled in Ezion. Okay, then the groups which the spies found in Canaan at the time, just before they entered the land, was the Amalekites, which was in the Negev. You had the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites in the hill country. That's where they would generally where the Israelites was going to go settle. And then you had the Canaanites to the seaside and to the Jordan. When I talk about the seas, I'm talking about the salt sea. Okay. Now, don't have them back in front of me now, forgetting the name of the sea. There was the Galilean Sea on top, and then at the bottom you had the guys, help me. Look at the map in front of you. The Dead Sea. Then you had what we call the Central Mountain Range, which was an extension of the Lebanon Mountains west of the Jordan. We had an Eastern Range. There was 4 levels of terrain between in Palestine itself, on the Mediterranean on the east and the Arabian Desert on the Mediterranean on the west, Arabian Desert on the east. And you had the Central Mountain Range. In fact, there's a lot of mountain ranges running through this country. An extension of the Lebanon Mountains west of the Jordan. There's the Eastern Range, which is an extension of the anti-Lebanon Mountains or Mount Hermon east of the Jordan. I can picture this stuff. If you look at it, maybe you'll be able to get them. Then you had the Maritime Plain, which was mostly the Philistines, between the Central Range and the Mediterranean Sea, and then the Jordan Valley, which ran between the 2 mountain ranges. Now, the Negev, this is one of the areas, waterless, south of the Judean wilderness. That's kind of here at the bottom, Beersheba, Dan to Beersheba. Beersheba is in the south. Mostly plateau, only goes about 220 to 300 meters above sea level. Very little water. Remember Abraham and Isaac there with all the wells and springs and the fights over there? This is the area. Remember there was a fight about over 3 or 4 wells that they had? This is the area where the grazing was good, but not a lot of water, okay? Yet they relied on springs, wells and pools. Even though it was occupied at times, it's very desolate, and this area acted as a counter for invasion, actually. That is why Israel is such a protected area, because you have the desert, very dry area at the bottom, then the Mediterranean on that side, Jordan on this side, with also the mountain ranges, so it's not easy to come in, except maybe from the north. But in the north we also have the Lebanon mountains. Israel camped in the southern Negev while the spies investigated Canaan. And in the wilderness home of the Hebrews, it was also the wilderness home of the Hebrews during 38 years of their wanderings. But besides that, funnily enough, just around this area, you find main roads which leads to Egypt and to Sinai again. So it circles around the area, the main roads. The Maritime Plain extends from desert region south of Gaza. Remember Gaza on the Mediterranean Sea is here at the bottom, and runs all along the coast up to the Leontis River. Also doesn't provide for good natural harbour, therefore the Israelites themselves were not seafarers. However, the rain prevents agriculture, and so actually it forces you to turn to the sea for your life, for survival and for foreign trade. Now Greece has a similar coastline, and I'll deal with it later. Okay, because just below Greece in those areas you have a little island called Crete. Also similar type of terrain. Then you have Akko, Dor and Joppa, which is the seaports, yet no protection in case of storms. It was a very awkward place to live in. Then still the maritime coastal plain. Fertile section was divided into 3 sections, and the fertile section also just ran obviously along the coast. You had 3 plains, one which was Philistia, Gaza to Joppa, which is both seaports, and both was important for agriculture and its strategic position into Canaan. But it was also a route for invasion, because once you come up along those routes, you can go down into the valleys, because you had the valley of Sorek, you had the valley of Ajalon, and then there was a third valley. So they would come up along the coast. If they wanted to attack, they would go into these valleys to get into the central part of Israel. You have the plain of Sharon, that's from Joppa to Mount Carmel. Swampy, they say at first, but because the rainfall dropped over the years, it was completely drained, almost drained by the time of Jesus. Then you have the plain of Achor, north of Mount Carmel. That particular plain was assigned to the tribe of Asher, who actually failed to drive out its inhabitants. In the Old Testament, none of the plains was occupied by Israel. None of these. That's what I'm saying. They were more to the central part, more to the Jordan, and more upwards in the country. The Shephelah is just simply a low hill country from the valley of Ajalon to the Viertel. Low rainfall, yet valuable for cultivation of olives, grapes, grain, and pasturage. I'm actually thinking of our area in Cape Town as well. If you think we might not have the same type of layout, but here we grow olives. We're starting to grow, actually mostly grapes, but we're also starting to grow olives. If you go down to some of the farms now, you'll actually find olive trees now. Because our area is getting drier and drier, they found other means of creating both an income and will keep the economy strong. We also have grain, just a little further up, and good pasturage in this right up into the northern Cape. You will find pasturage. Central highlands of Palestine. Now this was the center of the Israelite population. The center of Israelite population was the hill country, southern Syria, from southern Syria to Palestine to the Negev. Okay, and takes on the appearance of a plateau and is divided into Galilee, Samaria, and Judah. And these names will become important to us later. The northern part of Galilee is quite rugged. Southern part is much lower, less hilly and mild in climate, and some of the rolling land can be cultivated. However, in biblical times, when Abraham originally came through the first time, it was quite wooded, they say. Lower Galilee contains parallel mountains with broad valleys between them like Jezreel, Esdraelon. Megiddo is situated in this valley. It's also a strategic military location which guarded access to the Jordan Valley, the valley of Jezreel. Also one of Solomon's chariot cities. Then you'll find the Upper Galilee included most of the cities assigned to Asher and Naphtali. The plain of Esdraelon provided an accessible route from the coastal plain of Palestine to the Jordan Valley. And the plain of Israel is also important because it reminds us of the victories over Barak and Sisera of Hazor in Judges 4 and 5. Now Nazareth was located in the hill country north of the Esdraelon plain. Still in the Central Highlands. But now we're now in Samaria. Okay, we're looking at Samaria. Primarily a land of mountains, but with a lot of fertile valleys. And this is why they stayed there. You had these high rolling hills, they need to move down. If you look at, we might not have the same, but we do in Stellenbosch and those areas you have those rolling hills, that type of thing. But in Israel it's just a little more rugged and higher. But you are able to still plant, because of the fertile ground, you're still able to plant olive trees and especially grapes on those plains. Now Samaria extended from the valley of Jezreel in the north and with its southern border between Mizpah and Bethel. We're still playing at the top. Okay? You could have Bethel is in the you need to check the names as I'm moving through. That particular area is assigned to Manasseh and Ephraim. The first name of the city used by Omri as his capital, this is Samaria we're talking about, but later referred to the entire area. It was built in 870 BC on a hill 7 miles northwest of Shechem. And Shechem also becomes important to us later. It also overlooked the main trade route to Esdraelon and was easily defended. Very important, Omri's son Ahab built an ivory palace in Samaria, and we actually have archaeological finds of the ivory inlays of the furnishings of that particular palace. So there's still archaeological discoveries surrounding that palace that is available to us as proof today. 3 cities in the area that is important to us to remember is Shechem. That is where Jacob purchases a plot of land. Joseph is buried on Jacob's plot. And it also becomes the first capital of the northern kingdom. We also have Shiloh. Can you remember Shiloh? Before Jerusalem becomes the main center, Shiloh is the main center of worship. Remember the ark is placed there? Where the Israelites built the tabernacle, which served as the national sign. We had the annual feast there. If you go to 1 Samuel 1:3, you will see that the family went up yearly to Shiloh to present themselves and to take their offerings. We're talking about Hannah. The ark was also removed during a battle. If you go to 1 Samuel 4. Remember when they went up to go and fight the Philistines? They lost the first one, they struggled against them, and then when they could fetch the ark, eventually they lost that ark. The ark was taken from them. Third city that's important is Bethel, which is also called the house of God. Now here Abram built his first altar, and Jacob had his dream of angels and ladders. Also in the Central Highlands, you find Judea. Judah and Benjamin here again were assigned land in this area, which extended from Bethel to Beersheba. Remember, there was two kingdoms. Judah and Benjamin formed the kingdoms of Judah when Israel split into two kingdoms. You had the 10 kingdoms. Judah and Benjamin formed the kingdom of Judah at the southern end. Benjamin also provides Israel's first king, which is Saul. And then you have 3 valleys which provide access into Judea. And this is the 3 valleys that I was talking about.